What's going on, all you gamers? Today we're back with a little bit more Aliens Fireteam Elite, and today I'm going to be going over what I believe are very possibly the strongest perks that you can get for each class. So if you want to create some absolutely amazing builds, do a lot of damage and bring a lot of utility to the team, then stay tuned, that's coming up next. Welcome back, all you guys and girls. As always, Full Things Gaming, Full Things Xbox. Then why not hit that subscribe and bell icon? But for today I'm here to tell you some absolutely great perks that you can chuck into your class and will just make them a whole bunch more versatile. So what have we got? Kicking it off with the gunner, we're going to jump straight over to his perks list, and the first one we're going to go into is this one just here, Quick Load Interlink. Overclock can now instantly reload your current gun on activation and also extends the 50% reload speed increase to your whole team. This, in the right build with the right gun, say for example a shotgun, can absolutely decimate things. No matter how many bullets you've got left, tap this, it's going to instantly reload, and it means you're just going to be able to start over as well as your team. If you've got a couple of gunners, you can easily take out the biggest baddies without even trying if you've got some strong weapons. Definitely one of the best ones you can have on in a team, and really good for helping out your team and doing a lot of damage yourself. Next up, and we've got Focus Fire. Although it's a bit of a pain because it is 4 slots, it does mean you get more damage, and pretty much using the gunner class is all about chucking up as much damage as you can and using your overclock ability. So damaging a target causes them to take 2% more damage. This effect stacks up to 5 times. If you're hitting that same target, you're going to get 10% extra damage. Anytime you can boost your damage is really appreciated on the gunner. This right here is something you'll probably want to invest in if you can manage those 4 spaces. Next up, and this is just one you have to put on the gunner if you've got it, this is the one you get from the hidden caches. I would really recommend, if you do find this, chuck it in your build. Overclock further increases your own fire rate by 25%. This means you're going to dish out a lot more firepower, a lot more damage over a faster period of time, meaning you'll nuke all of those tougher elites and just have a lot of fun while you're doing it. Now last but by no means least, this one right here I absolutely love, Disorientating Blast. Even though your frag grenade is not most of the time what you tend to focus on too much with the actual gunner, it still does a big bit of damage. But with this, it also gives you a little bit of versatility, and it means you can proc some other things. So Disorientating Blast, your grenade now also knocks down the affected target. This means everything that gets hit by that blast is knocked down. A lot of things in this game can take extra damage, and a lot of people in this game put damage on their builds in order to maximise from this. For example, this one over here, Down and Out, which is actually a Demolisher perk. A lot of people put this in their skill tree. 20% more damage is an absolute abundance in the right builds, and along with this, it really helps your team out, especially if you're facing those stronger foes and you really want a bit of breathing time. Next up, and we're jumping over to the Demolisher. So first up, and we're going to go over Assault and Battery. Each target hit by blast wave reduces its cooldown by 10%. This can be ridiculously good on certain levels, and in horde mode you'll find. Often you'll use this and you'll only have a few seconds, and sometimes not even any seconds, between being able to generate your next blast wave. Hand in hand with that, and another great one to use, is this one just up here, Bigger and Better. Increases the radius of the attached ability by 40%. Now there's not much that gives you this much in the game for radius, so definitely, if you can manage to put it on your build, probably chuck this on and you won't have to worry about radius with any of the other universal perks. I'd probably recommend it for Blast Wave if you're going to be using this, but if you're not focusing on Blast Wave, you may want to chuck it over to your rockets so you get more AoE damage from those. Next up, and another great one, and again the hidden perk for the Demolisher, is Rampage. This one right here, killing an enemy grants a stack of Rampage. At 25 stacks, your fire rate, reload speed and movement speed are greatly increased, but your stability is decreased and lasts 8 seconds. This one, when you pull it off and you're facing one of those tougher guys, is absolutely going to shred through them. It's really fun to use, and often you'll find yourself with the Demolisher probably using a smart gun. This comes into play an awful lot, and if you're lucky and you've managed to get those stacks up, when you're facing those tougher elites, the drones, the Praetorians, all things such as that, you're really going to go to town with damage. This is one you probably should invest in if you can manage to fit it into your build. Doesn't always work out that you've got max stacks when you need it, but when you pull it off, it does work a real treat. Now last and definitely not least, probably one of the best ones in the game is Dan and At. You deal 20% more damage to enemies that are stunned or knocked. You can make the Demolisher an absolute stun knock build genius. He's really great at that kind of stuff. He's got a lot going for him. So this right here is definitely worth putting into his build if you want that extra damage and you've managed to put a lot of stun, knock, whatever you're going for in your build. This right here really helps out. Next up, and we're going to be jumping over to the Technician. The first one I'm going to jump over to is Compatibility Matrix. While this ability is active, you deal 10% more damage and can stack up to 3 times. Chuck this on your coils and it will mean you'll be doing 10% more damage every time a coil is out. If you need a big boost, chuck out all 3 of them for 30% extra damage. If you can only manage to get 2 on the floor, that also works a treat. 10, 20 or 30% extra damage is nothing to be sneezed at and can absolutely go a long way in the right build with a Technician. Another absolutely great one, and again it's one that you need to get from those hidden caches, is Creative Pain Point Solutions. You and your turret deal 10% more damage to slowed enemies. You're going to make sure that you've got a lot of slow going on in your build. The coils will help with that. You'll probably be putting some grids on the floor. There's just a lot going on with the Technician that means this comes into play pretty much at all times. Also, other people will probably be doing it in your team. This right here is definitely one that you should fit on if you can chuck it into your build and if you found it. The next one I'm going over is the Incinerator Turret Replacement ability. This right here is just so good, it really is. If you can manage to get your coils on the floor, if you can trap things in that and absolutely barbecue them, this will net you some ridiculous damage and just tear through those tougher enemies like they're butter. It really helps you out and has a lot more health as well. Definitely the best turret you can put on. Chuck this into your build as soon as possible. Next up, another one that I really enjoy using, especially if you're going into harder difficulties, is Disruptive Technology. Charge coils also reduces the damage dealt by affected enemies by 25%. It might not sound like much, but along with some of the other things in your kit, and if other people are doing things such as this, it can really help to mitigate that damage. Also, it's only 2 slots. For me, that really helps it out, meaning that you're not going to spend too much on it because it's not going to net you any extra damage, but it is definitely going to help you and it is going to help your team out at pretty much all time. As long as your charge calls are up very often, this is definitely worth having in your build if you're playing those late stages. This one isn't a hidden one, this is one that you can grab straight from the armory. Jumping over to the dock, and again the first one I'm going to be going over is the replacement to the station, and this one is Suppression Station. Your trauma station now has a larger radius and debuffs enemies who step into it, reducing their movement speed and damage dealt. I pretty much always find myself putting this one on. You don't have to have it, I just find it really helps. One of the best moves you can have for the dock, because his charging station is pretty much the thing that you're going to want to chuck at if you can, and being able to slow him down is really going to help. Just make sure you're not standing it at all times and taking up all of the health. Just over here we have Surgeon's Hands. This one is a little bit niche. It's not one that you would think is amazing, but as you start playing the game a bit more, as you start getting into those later difficulty levels, this can really help. You can no longer be stumbled while interacting with objects and reviving allies or using an aid kit. Trust me, the amount of times you'll try to pick something up, or you try to get ammo, or you try to pick someone else up and you'll just fall over and get killed because you're knocked out of it 3 or 4 times in a row, this can really help, especially when he's got a lot of other things going on in his build, such as things such as this, the rapid recovery, and of course the bedside manner. Definitely one you want to invest in if you do want to be the core of your team for pickups and making sure that everyone is going to stick around. Next up, and just one of my favourite ones in the game, especially for the dock, if I can pronounce it properly, Anesthesiologist, which is very tough to pronounce. After not taking damage for at least 10 seconds, gain 10% of your current life as temporary health. This can really help. It doesn't just stop at 150, it can man up a little bit as you're working your way through the levels. It really can be a lot of fun, and a lot of times you'll find that that actual kind of acts as an overshield, and they'll take that health off instead of your actual main bar. Meaning if you're unlucky and you get tapped every once in a while, it may well be that you're still at full health anyway, so you won't need to use your trauma station and you're going to be a lot tankier than pretty much most of the other builds. Next up, and unfortunately I haven't been able to get my hands on this yet, but another hidden perk is Neurotoxin Specialist. Dealing damage to an enemy weakens them, causing them to deal 20% less damage for over 5 seconds. Like I said, the Doc is never going to be the biggest for damage, but he is going to be the best for support, meaning that if you can make sure people don't get hurt as much, you probably should put it into your build somewhere, and that can really help people out because you're going to be dishing out damage, you're going to be shooting things constantly, and if they do manage to get by you or hit some member of your team, they're just not going to hurt them as much as they originally would have. Next one we're going to go over is the Recon class. Jumping over to his perks, and the first one we're going to go over is Got Your Back. Killing an enemy that is attacking a teammate instantly reloads you and your teammate's equipped gun. This right here can be an absolute lifesaver. I didn't realise it at the start, only through a friend playing it, who actually told me that it isn't someone who's focusing on your actual team member, it's when they're tracking them, meaning that all of the aliens can be focusing on other teammates pretty much at all times. If you're playing this properly with the Recon and you're doing kind of Overwatch and shooting from long range, killing off things that are attacking your other teammates, you can make it so that they do not have to reload very often at all, and it can really help out with firing constantly. Just over here, and we've got a universal perk, and that's downrange. Increase your far distance damage by 20%. In some cases this means your guns can deal more damage at max range than at close range. This right here for me is all for the Recon. It won't work in all playstyles, it won't work in all builds, and it probably won't work in all situations because sometimes the map is a little bit smaller, but anytime you do find yourself being able to pump out a bit of extra damage, especially if you like using snipers or DMRs, I would say this is definitely worth putting into your build as long as you're managing to get weak point damage on those longer ranges. Next up, and we've got Back in the Fight. Got Your Back now also reduces the remaining recharge time for you and your affected target's abilities by 10%. So now not only are you making sure that everyone doesn't need to reload most times with this one just over here, Got Your Back, it also means that you're reducing their cooldown time on their abilities. Absolutely amazing, and for 4 slots these two just work really well for bringing a bit of utility to the team and making sure they can do a lot more than they actually realise they're doing through you having these perks on. Next up, and unfortunately another one that I haven't been able to find yet, and this hidden perk is Red is Dead. You and your teammates deal an additional 10% damage to revealed targets. You will be revealing targets with your pups. This will mean that you and your teammates have that 10% additional damage on a lot of targets in the game. Really can be used to your advantage, and extra damage whenever you can manage to give it to your team can really help out for taking out those tougher elites, especially later level. The last class we're going to be going over is the Phalanx class. For his perks, there's quite a few that you can use, but these ones I think will really stand out. The first one is Shell Shock. This right here creates shock pulse, also causes affect enemies to take an additional 10% damage for 4 seconds. If you're using your shock pulse very often, which you'll probably be trying to do for this class, it will mean that every time you do that, they're going to take an additional 10% damage. Time it right, time it with those elites, and again, if everyone does what they're supposed to be doing, you can help to melt those really fast because the damage is going to stack up when other people are using their skills and their moves alongside it. Next up, and his replacement ability for Shock Pulse, is this one just here, Concussion Pulse. Shock Pulse's initial blast is now concussive, causing it to deal a small amount of damage, have a larger radius, and knock enemies backwards and down for 3 seconds. However, it will no longer grant a short buff to the player. I always find in pretty much any build I'm making, if I can manage to give the rest of the team a little bit of a breather and manage to knock things down so that other things come into effect, this really can help people out. And again, like I said, for those tougher enemies, it really can mean you can turn around, focus fire on what you need to, and knock them down and absolutely destroy them most times before they can get back up. Next up, and another of the hidden perks, is Aftershock. Now Aftershock, I've seen it in use, is absolutely amazing. Once you use your shock pulse, it leaves behind an electric field on the floor, and it means that it's going to slow enemies down and it's going to last for up to 10 seconds. Really good, can really help your team out with a bit of survivability, and it can be up quite often because of that 10-second duration on it. Next we've got Vanguard. Now this doesn't work all the time. I would say you're definitely going to need a close-knit team, but if you have got that, especially if you're communicating and you're not shooting each other in the back at later stages, this can really help you out. Nearby allies that are behind you take 10% less damage and an additional 10% less damage when your shield is up. As long as you're playing, as long as you're focused in a group, you can really mitigate a lot of damage with this by making sure that enemies either hit your shield, or even if they are managing to get past you, when they hit someone else they're not going to hit them quite as hard. The only thing is, it doesn't have the furthest reach, so make sure that they've got that icon coming up under their bar so that you know that they're going to be there and they're going to be taking less damage when they're getting hit. Lastly, and adding one onto this that I've probably got to just for the sheer fact that it's tough not to put this in sometimes, and that's resilience. Grants you 20% stun resist, 10% aim down sight's movement speed, and 10% shield movement speed. Now this doesn't sound that good, I didn't realise I needed it. It does come into play an awful lot, and the reason for that is mainly for the actual movement speed. Aim down sights gives you 10, shield up gives you 10, meaning you get 20% extra movement speed. When you're playing as the Phalanx class, you'll notice this an awful lot if you're using that shield a lot. Trust me, it's probably one you want to look into, even though you're only going to be using it to move around a little bit faster. It definitely does help to make sure you feel like you're not stuck in mud. Well, you guys and girls, that's just my opinion. If you've got any that I've missed off and you think I'm completely wrong, then chuck it in the comments. Sometimes you'll have different builds, sometimes there'll be different playstyles going on. But as always, for all things gaming, for all things Xbox, take care, I'll see you on next day.